Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 14. Chapter 122. Ava Carter had me moved, and I appeared to be in some basement. I had been asleep for a few hours or maybe days. I was unsure when I heard the door open. The man I hadn't recognized in my dazed state came down the stairs. His scent was familiar, and I couldn't figure out why at first. He had a blue cap on his head and a handkerchief tied around his face like last time. Yet with my sense of smell and taste returning, my eyes widened when I recognized the scent. A scent I smelled around Amber. Micah. He walked over to me, where I sat in the corner, my wrist handcuffed to a drainpipe. He produces a needle, stabbing it into my thigh, and I yank on my restraints and snarl at him when he turns and simply walks back toward the stairs. My eyes began to blur, yet I fought to keep them open. Micah. I tried to call, but my voice was barely a murmur, yet it was enough to make him freeze on the bottom step, and his entire body tensed as he gripped the handrail. He turned slowly, and his eyes roamed over me, and I knew without a doubt it was him. Something shriveled inside me and died as it dawned on me that he raped the mother of his child. When they kill you, I hope it's slow, I growl at him. He growls and stalks toward me. They will never know, and you won't be alive to tell them, he sneers, gripping the back of my hair. I glare at him. No woman forgets the face of the man that fathered her child, just like they never forget the face of their rapist. I sneer at him, and he shoves me back. My head bangs on the pipe, and he rips his hat off, clutches his hair, and screams in frustration. He curses, kicking a wooden chair. I had no choice. Do you think I could just stand there and watch? They would have killed me. You deserve far worse for what you did, and I can't wait for Dante to give it to you, I spit at him through clenched teeth. She won't remember. They drugged her, he says, shaking his head. I don't know if he was trying to convince himself of that or me. Either way, he was wrong. Zoe was out of it, but she was not that far gone. She wouldn't have missed a scent she was accustomed to through her daughter. My head spun throbbed where I bumped it, and Micah scratches his chin when he snarls. Wandering around the basement, looking at the shelves, he snatches a piece of timber. I am not going to jail because of you, he sneers, tapping the timber on the palm of his hand. My eyes open frantically as he stalks toward me, and I yank on the cuffs in a last-ditch effort to free myself. They don't need to know, and Carter was planning on killing you anyway, he says slowly, trying to convince himself this would work. He lifts the piece of timber, and I gasp when he swings it, clenching my eyes shut, only I hear a crash instead. My eyes open, and I sag against the wall in a huffed wheeze when I see Carter shove him. I didn't even hear him come in. What do you think you're doing? Carter bellows, gripping the front of his shirt. Micah was on his back, hands up in surrender. Carter snarls at him before shoving him. Yet the tension rolling off Carter was palpable, his alpha aura menacing and straighteners his suit. He picks up the knocked-over wooden chair, sits the chair back upright, and takes a seat. He puts his head in his hands. Zoe. I murmured. My lip quivered, and Carter's head lifted, and his eyes went to me before flicking away. Your friend is alive. The rogue girl Macy got her, he says, staring off blankly at the concrete wall behind me. He mutters, but my ears can't pick up the sound, and I let out a breath of relief. At least Zoe is all right. Micah sits up and tries to get to his feet. Carter watches him, and his lips press in a line when the two thugs come down the stairs from before. My muscles start to go numb, and tears burn my eyes when they move toward me. Don't touch her, Carter snaps at them, and they pause, looking at him. No one touches her, Carter says, looking at each of them. But you said, the dark-haired man says. I said no one touches her. Geez, bro, what crawled up you? Nothing, I just need to think. Carter says, rubbing his temples before running his fingers through his thick, blonde hair. The two thugs look at each other before looking at me. Micah also appeared confused as he glanced between the three men when Carter's phone rang. He looks at the screen, and a silly smile splits onto his face and he looks up, noticing everyone watching him. He rejects the call before looking at his men before his eyes fall on Micah briefly. He nods to his men, who instantly snarl and start stalking him while he backs up. Wait, what's the meaning of this? Carter, we had a deal, Micah says. Deal changed because now my plans have changed. Chuck him in the trunk while I figure out what to do next, Carter says, and Micah fought but was no match for the two men who quickly overpowered him. Wait, why have our plans changed? I thought we were killing the BTHN kid, the blonde-haired man asks while holding a struggling Micah. I need to think of something else first. Something has come up. So, what do you want us to do? Carter's ponders for a second and bites his lip, looking at the ceiling. We hand over a peace offering, and get me everything you have on that rogue girl, Macy, he says, and the men look at each other, confused, and my brows furrow. I wouldn't mind taking a bite out of her, the dark-haired man spoke, his words cut off when Carter launched out of the chair and punched him. The man staggers back, and Micah uses that chance to escape up the steps. The blonde man gave chase. Yet I couldn't tear my eyes from Carter, who was pummeling his own man before he stomped his head into the ground, spilling blood and brain matter everywhere. Horrified at the display of violence happening in front of me, I remained quiet and still. Carter kills the man in front of me, his face barely recognizable, and the blonde man returns, stomping down the steps and stops when he sees his friend. When Carter stands upright, he begins shrugging his suit jacket off. He tosses it on the broken chair before slowly undoing the buttons on what was a white shirt which was now stained red. I watched the blonde man's Adam's apple bob in his throat as he swallowed. Find Brendan, clean this piece of setup, and get me another shirt, Carter snaps at him with not so much as a stutter, like killing his own pack member meant little to him. Ah, boss, Micah, he can get himself out of his own. I have bigger issues, now get me everything on that Macy girl and gets this place cleaned up and feed her, and get her a drink, he says, pointing to me. The man nods swiftly, rushing off up the steps to do his bidding. Carter removes his shirt before moving toward a rusty sink basin in the far corner. He washes his hands before drying them on a rag. When he is finished, he pulls his phone from his pocket. He types in a message and smiles to himself. I watched him, his entire demeanor changing when his phone rang. He answers it. Hello, little mate, Carter purrs and a gasp leaves me. Who was he speaking to? Chapter 123. Macy. My head was swimming. I couldn't bring myself to tell them about Carter being my mate. I wanted nothing to do with the vile man that would allow the woman I considered to be my sister to be violated the way she was. Yet shame coursed through me. I felt like I didn't deserve to be around her after what my mate had done to her. Was I cursed when it came to men? Am I the bad omen for my girls? I was seriously considering it because unless Tatum marked me, I was as good as DD once I rejected Carter, and my mate ruined Zoe's life, and his father was responsible for killing Marin's mother and my mate by kidnapping her sister. However, Carter being my mate, left multiple additional issues because I will be rejecting him, but then what will happen with Taylor? Who would look after her and love her the way I do? My mum was getting old, plus she had my brother and his mate living with her, and as much as I love my brother, he wasn't exactly a good role model. After showering and checking in with Callan and the kids, I headed to see Tatum. At the moment, he was the only good thing going in my life other than Taylor. Because everything felt like it was falling into tatters, and I had no idea how to come back from this, I saw Marin went through without Lucian. Saw how Callan's rejection killed Valerie, so what would me rejecting Carter do? What would be the consequence of that? Walking down the corridor to his ward, I stopped and spoke with his physio lady. Her name was Tracy, and she was the one helping us get him back on his feet. She warned me he was in a mood before I left her going to find his room. I knew something was wrong before I even opened the door. I could hear him cursing and heard glass break as he tossed something. Pushing the door open, I found Tatum on the ground, his crutches by the bed. Stupid leg! He curses with a growl. Immediately I rushed to his side, gripping under his arms to help pull him. Why didn't you use the crutches? I asked him when he pushed me away, forcing me to drop him. He grunts. I move to help him again when he snarls at me. Just leave me, Macy. Stop bothering me, he snaps. I roll my eyes. I had put up with his pity parties before, only this time when I ignored him and retrieved the wheelchair pushing beside him. He growled angrily at me and punched it. For once in your gosh life, Macy, stop trying to fix everything, he snaps. I go to reply when he holds up a hand, cutting me off. Don't. I am sick of it. I am useless, and I don't want you feeling sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you. You'll be fine. Tracy said you did great today. It's only a matter of time, and soon you'll be walking around, I tell him, trying to lift his mood. Want the crutches instead? I ask him, moving to retrieve them. Get out. Tatum snarls at me, and I freeze, glancing at him over my shoulder. Pardon? You just can't help yourself. Always gotta try to fix everything. My leg is FKED, Macy. It isn't getting any better, and I am sick of you telling me it will, so just get out. This isn't going to work, he says, turning to look away. Tatum? You're just having a bad day, you'll see. I can help you shower, then how about we go outside? I tell him, leaning down and offering him my hand when he slaps it away. I said leave. I don't want you here. Are you deaf? He snaps, yet his words pissed me off before I realized it. I had slapped him. You dare speak to me like this after everything? Where is your family? Hey? Who has been here every day? You don't get to speak to me that way. You think you're the only one having a day? I snap at him while he rubs his cheek. I know he was upset about his legs and needing help and relying on people, but that is no reason to take it out on me. I am useless, don't you see that? I couldn't even help you today to get Zoe back. I had to hear about it through the mind link. Tatum yells. No one expected your help, Tatum, we had it handled, and I am not here to visit your SHT leg. I am here because for once I needed you, I tell him. Well, I don't want you here. I am sick of you babying me, so just leave, I growl that he was trying to kick me and click my tongue. Fine, Tracy can deal with him, and I will see him tomorrow. I get you're upset, so I will just leave you and come see you tomorrow, I tell him, heading toward the door before beating him senselessly or breaking his other leg. I so did not need this drama right now. I just wanted to spend time with him, maybe get a hug so I could pretend for a few moments everything was okay. As I grip the door handle, Tatum speaks, making me stop. Macy, he says, and I look at him just as he pulls himself up to sit on the edge of the bed. Don't come back tomorrow, I have been thinking about it all day, and I can see it isn't going to work, so please don't make this harder than it needs to be for once. Just do as I ask. I swallowed, my throat suddenly clogged and my eyes burned with the urge to break down. He was seriously going to break up with me? Over a leg? Or was he using it as an excuse since I couldn't give him a kid? I go to ask, needing to know when he shakes his head. Just go, Macy, we are done, he says and my eyebrows raise. I really am cursed. Suddenly, I found myself speechless. I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded my head before walking out. Something else was taken from me, I just needed to pretend, if only briefly, that I would find a solution where there was none. I needed to pretend someone other than a monster would want me. Clearly, I wasn't even allowed that moment's grace. I couldn't stop the tears when I climbed back into the car. Everything was so FK'd up. It felt stupid crying, pointless, and a waste of time, yet I couldn't seem to stop as I headed toward the hotel. I couldn't go back to Marin and Zoe like this. They had enough stress at the moment, so instead, I went to work. I needed the distraction. Yet, pulling up, I saw the project manager out front talking to someone in a suit before realizing it was Marin's lawyer. He must be here to drop off the new deeds to the place. Getting out of my car, I learn that is exactly what he is here for. He hands me the paperwork and goes over it with me on the hood of my car. When he is done, he bids me farewell. I watch him walk back to his car when I sing out to him. "Ah, Joseph? I don't suppose I can ask for your help with something." I call out, and he stops. "Of course, what is it you need?" he asks. "Everything I tell you is confidential, right?" I ask him. "Yes, if you are my client, it is." "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to do something, but I don't want Marin and Zoe finding his brows furrow." "May I ask what it is?" "Last will and testament, also some custody documents, a will and guardian for Taylor, I assume." I nod. "Well, the first step is the guardian must agree. You can't just leave her to a family member, though that is usually where they are placed," I sighed. I thought he would say that. "How about I draw up some documents for you to look after, and I can have them sorted for you to go over at the end of the week?" I shake my head. "Can you have them done by say?" I pull my phone out, checking the time. 8 p.m. tonight. He glances at his watch and scratches his neck but nods. "I assume all assets like your share of this place go to Taylor?" I nod. "And Taylor?" "I want to leave her in the care of Marin or Zoe, or both." He nods. "I will see you at 8 o'clock tonight. If you could meet me at my office, at that time." Joseph says, and I nodded my head and let him leave, feeling like I accomplished at least something. Now I just had to hope Marin and Zoe didn't question me wanting to sign guardianship to them if I die, because one thing I knew was once I reject Carter I was as good as dead. Getting in my car, I pull out my phone and message Carter asking if I could see him, when the phone rings a few minutes later. "Hello little mate," he purred and tears burned my eyes. "We need to talk," I tell him. "Correct, and I have a proposition for you," he says and I pause. "Could I use this to get Ava home?" "I'm listening," I tell him. "You need me," Carter says. "Definitely not," That is what you think, but I have a peace offering. Tell Officer Derek to check the mine entrance tunnels. I hear he has been looking for his son, Micah. Carter tells me. A peace offering? You had my best friend raped. I snapped at him. No, she fought back. She wasn't part of the plan. But I give you Micah as payment for that. Payment? She isn't I am trying here, Macy. I offered to barter, and I want Ava back. I tell him, and I want my mate. I growl. Wouldn't want anything to happen to little Taylor, would you, or Tatum? I hear he is in a bad way. I doubt he would put up much of a fight, and seeing as I have eyes on Callan and eyes into the hospital, I don't think it would be too hard to get to them, Carter says, and I swallowed. What do you propose, then? I ask him, how many traitors did we have among us? I didn't doubt his words, though I have seen firsthand what this man was capable of and his father. Clearly, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I want immunity to leave with you. I have my money. My pack will handle John. I wanted to handle Marin and Valerian myself, but seeing as you have come into the picture, I am willing to renegotiate. What is this vendetta you have against the Shadow Pack Alpha? I demand, and Carter laughs. John started it when he tossed my mother from the city and told my father she left. No, your mother left for your father's infidelities. Marin told me this story before. Wrong, that is what everyone was told. John forced my mother forsaken, for killing Rachel, and this had something to do with Marin. How? Because of who fathered her. I scoff. It sounded ridiculous. Her family started it, I am just finishing it, Carter states. Started what? I scream at him. Rachel was Claire Summers' cousin. She tried to kill my mother and my mother killed her in self-defense, and now he will know what it's like to lose everything just like my mother did. I glance around nervously, looking out the windows. Now I will give you a chance to deal with whatever is you were speaking with good old Joseph about, and take Micah as proof my word is good, Carter says, and I say nothing, though he confirmed my suspicions that he had more people working for him. Think about it, Macy. You have until tomorrow to decide, or I kill Ava, Marin, everyone you love, and hold dear. Their fates now rest on your decision, so choose wisely, love. Because either way, you will be mine. And if I agree and you leave them alone? I ask him. Cogs started turning in my head as I navigated this new proposition. You have my word, Carter says, and I chew the inside of my lip. Speak soon, I tell him, hanging up before he could say anything else. Chapter 124. Lucian. My hands rubbed over Marin's huge bump. Relief flooded me as I finally got her home. She didn't want to leave Zoe, and I even had to get Doc Darnell in to tell her to go home. She was supposed to be on bed rest, but I knew she wouldn't rest at all until she saw with her own eyes that Zoe was alive. Marin had been quiet most of the trip and I knew she was worried about Ava. We had scoured the entire city, including the tunnels, but nothing. Any news yet? Marin asked as I leaned down to kiss her belly. I shake my head, and she pushes my face away, trying to tug the shirt she was wearing down. I growl at her, and she sighs, but I can tell she was too tired to argue with me. She hated her body. She believed she looked stretched out and ugly, but I loved the stretch marks marking her skin. I loved each one, loved that she was the vessel that currently carried 30 little fingers, 30 little toes, and 3 extra beating hearts. Hearts that were mine to protect and love. Yet to me, none were more important than hers, the one that beat so they could. We'll find them. The council. My phone started ringing, cutting my words off. I reach for it. I had told everyone to not use the mind link. Marin didn't need the extra stress, and I knew she would find no rest with everyone chatting away in our heads. Plus, now I had no idea who to trust. Macy's name pops up on the screen, and I glance at Marin as she rolls to reach for her water bottle. Sitting up, I grab it, handing it to her before kissing her head and walking out in case it was about Zoe. Hey, everything okay? Yeah, it's fine, but can you send someone out to the old mine road? She asked, and I pulled the phone from my ear to make sure it was her. It was an odd request, and she sounded strange on the phone. Why? I just drove past the hotel and reserve and saw a suspicious car head out that way. Just seemed odd. Okay, I will send Derek out that way with Dion. He is filling in tonight, I tell her. Where are you anyway? Marin was expecting you back by now. Just sorting a few things out at work. I will grab Chinese on the way home for everyone. Saves your dads from cooking, Macy says. Okay, can you? Yes, I will make sure to remember to get the prawn chips that the kids love, Macy laughs. Great, see you soon, I told her. We have a whole house full at the moment. Both mine, Marin's father were with us, Macy and Taylor, plus Casey and probably Zoe and Dante soon, depending on how comfortable they are with going home. I texted Derek and Dion, who said they would head out now before wandering into the kitchen where my father was preparing food for dinner. Macy is grabbing Chinese, I tell him, and he sighs. Thanks. I was trying to think of what to make and was about to send John grocery shopping. I tried to picture that, though I am sure he has shopped before, but to shop for this many would be a nightmare. What's up? Marin okay? Yeah, just tired. I've been thinking of moving everyone to the main pack house. It has been sitting empty for months and it has more space than here, I tell him. If it is too much, I can take John, Macy, and Taylor with me. No, it is fine. I think Marin likes everyone in one place at the moment, and I know she is worried about her father even though she won't admit it, yet, he feels guilty about Claire, Ava, and Zoe, Dad tells me. Where is he anyway? I think he is in doing puzzles with the kids, Dad says with a shrug. I know you don't like him, but he is her father, and we have all done something that wish we could take back, son, I know, and I don't hate him. I'm just worried that if something happens to him too that it might be Marin's tipping point, he murmurs, turning the kettle on. Anyway, I was talking to John. He confessed something to me earlier, Dad tells me, and I raise an eyebrow leaning on the counter. John banished Carter's mother from the city. She didn't leave because of Nixon. What? Dad nods. Yeah. Clary threatened to leave him if he didn't because they were close. Rachel was her cousin. So he banished her, but when he banished her and ordered her out, she had Nixon's daughter with her. John let Nixon believe she ran off with his daughter, but she didn't. He said he had felt guilty about it, but he couldn't find her once she was gone. He and Nixon had a rocky relationship as it was with business dealings falling through, so he didn't tell him, my father tells me. So Doc was right, there was more to the story. Anything else? No, that is all, he says when my phone rings. I pull it from my pocket and see it is Derek. I answer it quickly, turning and leaning against the counter. Yet it was Dion's voice that came through the other end. We got him. Got who? Micah, Dion tells me just as I hear a crash in the background. I'll be down soon, I tell him, hanging up. Hang on, Derek wants to speak to you, he says, and I waited for him to beg for his son. I hear the phone exchange hands. Pick up Dante on the way, Derek says before hanging up. That wasn't what I was expecting. I need to go, I heard. I will keep an eye on Marin, he said, and I nodded my head. Walking down the hall, I stuck my head to see the kids playing with John. Can you come with me? I ask him, and he nods, getting up from where he sat on the floor. Everything okay? He whispers, following me down the hall. Yeah. I need you to sit with Zoe. I need to take Dante somewhere, and I know Dante won't leave her with anyone she doesn't know. John nods and doesn't ask questions. He knows there is only one reason I would be pulling Dante away from Zoe's side. I stopped by the hospital on the way to find Zoe asleep and Dante sitting in a chair, staring at her. As I stepped inside the room, I motioned to him, and he got up from his seat. Dante looked exhausted. Huge bags hung under his eyes, and his hair looked like he had been running his fingers through it. John steps past him into the room. What's going on? I need you to come with me. John will wait with Zoe in case she wakes up, I tell him, and he glances into the room at his mate and John, who had taken his seat by her bed. Is it Casey? He asks worriedly, and I shake my head. Come on, I tell him. Dante sighs and ruins a hand down his face. Lucian, I'm not. We found Micah, I whispered to him, and the look on his face turned to feral rage. His eyes flicker, and he looks back in the room at John, who nods. She wakes. Tell her I went to have a shower, Dante tells him before pushing past me. We left the hospital and headed to the police station. Walking out, we were buzzed in, and I could hear arguing and fighting out the back before we even stepped into where the cells were. Crashing of furniture came from one of the interrogation rooms, and I could see on the screen on the wall Derek pummeling the living out of his son, who was trying to block his father's punches. Dion hits the intercom, and it buzzes inside, making Derek rise. Micah was sobbing uncontrollably, and blood coated his swollen face. Dante tried to rip the door open when he noticed the screen. Dion and I had to grab him. His entire body trembled with the urge to shift. The door opens, Officer Derek grabs the front of his son's shirt, tosses Micah out the door, and Micah sprawls onto the floor in the center of the room. Tears trekked down Officer Derek's face, and his lips quivered. Dad, please, Micah pleaded, and Dante slammed against me, wanting to get to him. You are not my son, I raised no rap, St. Derek spat at him before looking at Dante. He's all yours, Derek says to Dante before walking out. I nod to Dion to check on Derek as he leaves out the doors. Micah backed up, and I let Dante go, and Micah backed up, scrambling backwards as Dante stripped his shirt off, stalking toward him. You can't kill me. I am Casey's father, Micah said desperately. No, Casey's mine, Dante snarled. He growled, the noise so feral and the crazed look on his face made the Forsaken look tame before Dante shifted him and attacked him. I stepped back, sitting on the edge of the desk while Dante ripped him apart limb for limb, coating the police station with his blood, and his screams echoed off the walls. Chapter 125. Marin. When Macy returned home, she brought dinner with her, and tucked inside her handbag was a folder of documents. She sets the Chinese containers on the bench, and I start pulling down some plates and start serving, only to be scolded by Callan. Marin, you're supposed to be in bed. Do you not know what bedrest is? He says, clicking his tongue. I have sat in bed all afternoon, Kal. I am fine, he shakes his head, helping me to serve the kids dinner who were perched in their chairs around the table. Zoe was getting released from the hospital the next day. She rang earlier, and thankfully the nurse had given her some makeup, so she didn't freak Casey out. My father was waiting with her until Dante returned, but I wasn't willing to tell her where it was Dante went and why. Though I think she knew because there was only one reason that would make Dante leave her side, and that was revenge. You okay? I asked Macy, touching her arm, but she pulls away from me, smiling the fakest smile I had ever seen on her face. I narrow my eyes at her, and she sighs. Sorry, I'm on edge. All this rogue stuff, the hotel, Zoe. I swallowed, nodding and turning to flick the kettle on. Tea only Marin, Callan scolds. Geez, now I know where Lucian gets it from. Yes, Dad. Macy and I say simultaneously, and he chuckles. I will eat in the room with you. I need to speak to you about something anyway. Something not for kids' ears, she says, and I nod just as Callan chimes in. Great idea. You girls get settled, and I will bring some trays in and make your tea, he says, looking at me before pushing us out of the kitchen. Hang on, no. Shoo, shoo. Make her sit down. I caught her trying to bleach the bathroom. Watch her, Callan scolds. She is nesting, leaving her. Besides, she cleans when she is nervous, Macy defends me. Besides this sitting around was annoying, and I didn't like how everyone fussed. I get they're concerned, but I was near going insane from it. Not with my 3 babies, she doesn't. She is supposed to be on bed rest. We want them babies to stay in as long as possible, Callan tells Macy. Fine. Just let me get some Panadol, these cramps have been the worst. Stupid monthlies, she curses, and I blink at her confused. Wait. You still get your period? I ask her. Yeah. I am a female, Macy says. What do you think? The hysterectomy turned me into a man, she curses, shaking her head. Callan looks at her funny, and I look at him. Macy retrieves her Panadol from above the stove, popping 2 pills with a glass of water. As she turns, she notices us staring at her. What? She asks. You said you had a full hysterectomy? No, a partial. They took all the baby-carrying bits out, Macy says as if she was tired of this conversation already. But you have ovaries? I asked. Well, duh. I get a period, so I assume so, she shrugs. Then you're not infertile, Callan says, and she pops her hip and puts her hand on her waist. What part of? I haven't got the baby-carrying bits, did you not understand? She says sarcastically. Callan says one word. Surrogate, she seems taken aback. Yeah, because someone would want to carry my baby? Yeah, right. Besides, I need a man to kind of fertilize the egg and all. Unless your old dust is volunteering, she says. Callan pulls a face. Pass. I am too old for babies. But, this news will make Tatum happy, would have made him happy. He dumped me, she says, rubbing her temples. We are werewolves. We all know how impossible it would be to find a surrogate. Can't have a human carry them. And we are pack animals, it doesn't matter if it's not blood, you know what that would do to a she-wolf, she did have a point. I have never heard of someone becoming a surrogate, yet I would do it if I wasn't already pregnant. Though Lucian probably wouldn't let me. And Zoe was in no state to ask, and I am pretty sure she and Dante were trying before all this happened. Now, come on, I want to ask you something, Macy says, grabbing her handbag and tugging me toward my room. I get comfortable on my bed, propping myself up with pillows and settling under the blankets. Callan comes in a few minutes later with dinner trays for us. Once he has left, she retrieves the documents from her bag. "Are you okay?" I ask her. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" I let out a breath. "I'm talking about Tatum, it is what it is," she says, trying to deflect the conversation as she sets some papers on my legs. "Last will and testament?" I ask, looking at her. In case something happens to me, I want to ensure Taylor will have a place to go," she says. "And you want to do this now?" I ask her, and she shrugs. "Just thought, with all the rogue stuff. I just want to be sure. So I wanted to ask if you and Lucian would be willing to take her." "You know I can't leave her to Mum or my brother," she says. "That isn't even a question. I would move heaven to keep her." "You know that," she nods. "I know, and you and Zoe are the only ones I would trust my baby with. The only ones I know love her just as much as I do." I sign the document, and when Callan comes in, I ask him to sign the witness part, and he quickly does, though he gives Macy the same odd look I gave her. "Planning on going somewhere?" he asks. "What? No. Of course not. I just want to ensure Zoe's future is all." He looks at me, and I shrug. It was the first time she had ever brought anything like this up. But she did have a point. We all should have it, so I would have to speak to Lucian about it later. Though I had a will, and everything went to Valerian, I didn't even think of what would happen if something were to happen to Lucian and me. It gave me much to think about. We eat our dinner, and Macy goes to help Callan shower and bathe the kids while I get ready for bed before we tuck them in their beds. When Lucian rings, I answer my phone quickly. "Hey, when will you be home?" "I am home." "Where are the kids?" "In their beds." "Why?" "Make sure they don't come out of their rooms," he says. With a gr0an, I climb back out of bed, shuffling over to the door and up the hall. I stand between their doors, but they are all asleep. "Yeah, they are fine," I tell him when I hear the door click open. I glance down the hall, hearing movement when Lucian appears down the hall, and I gasp, glancing back at their rooms to ensure they are asleep. Lucian was drenched in blood from head to toe. Not a patch of skin wasn't coated in the coppery substance. He rushes into our room, and I hear the shower turn on in the ensuite. Moving back to the room, I close and lock my door to see Lucian step into the shower. I scoop up his clothes, tossing them in the hamper. They were sopping wet. The shower water turns red as it swirls down the drain. "Micah," I whisper, recognizing the scent, and he nods, turning to face me, rinsing the blood off his face. "Now I know where the name comes from," I tell him. He says nothing, just reaches for the soap. "Dante? Wants the other two? I thought you were leaving him to Dante." "Dante revived him and wanted help. He is my best friend, and God help when we get our hands on the other two," he says, his eyes darkening, and a growl escapes him. I swallowed before having to leave the bathroom from the pungent smell. When he comes out, he is clean and retrieves his pajamas. "My father went to the bar." "Don't worry, I sent Dad to get him." "And that would be them," Lucian says, and I nod, hearing the front door open and my father muttering up the hall. The smell of vodka reaches my nose from under the gap in the door and makes it wrinkle. Dad was drinking far too much, but not that I expected anything else. His daughter was missing, and his mate was dead. I wouldn't want to live either if our circumstances were reversed. "Any news from Carter or any sight of them?" He shakes his head when there is a knock on the door. Lucian tugs his shirt on before opening it, and it is Macy. Macy tells us she found the link between Rachel and my father, and that was what she was doing all afternoon. Callan leaned against the door listening but adding nothing. But it suddenly made sense why Carter was so hell-bent on ruining us. How do you know all this? Callan asks her, and her brows furrow. I went to the council chambers and dug through the old archives, Macy says, though something was off about her. I sent men there and found nothing, Lucian says. I also checked myself and couldn't find the link on the online records, Callan adds, and I look at Macy. There were some files buried. They were in the wrong box, Macy says. What box? Callan asks, and I don't understand the look on his face as he scrutinizes everything she says, wanting to know how she knows. Some old newspaper clipping box, buried right up the back, she says dismissively. Thanks. Well, I will ring Officer Derek and let him know, and also the council is still here. Macy asks. Yeah, they aren't leaving until we catch him, Lucian says, and she nods. At least for once, they have stepped in. But just be careful what you tell them, I feel like Micah isn't the only mole we have. What makes you think that? Callan asks. Dad, leave her be. She is tired, Lucian defends Macy. He puts his hands up in mock surrender and yet doesn't take his eyes off Macy, who is chewing her fingernail. Well, I am off to bed. I am beat. Wake me if anything at all happens, Macy says, making a quick escape. I watch her leave, and Callan follows out after her before I turn to Lucian, who was dialing no doubt the police station to let them know what we just found out. Though tomorrow I would be questioning my father a little more. Chapter 126. Carter, it was pissing me off that he thought he was calling the shots. I watched as John's beta slinked around his office as we reviewed the plans. Little did he know they were changing. I'm changing the plans, I tell him. He rocks back on his heels as he passes me my drink, where I sit in the armchair. Excuse me? Are you hard of hearing, Beta? I said I am changing the plans, we can't. It's too late. I already have everything set in motion, Clark says, and I raise an eyebrow at his words. I watch him over my glass as I take a sip of the cheap whiskey. Plans change, Beta. You'll heed to my demands, and you will comply and still get your revenge. If not, you will find yourself disposable, I tell him, watching as the twit swallows. I would have thought John's beta would have been more loyal. Turns out he was a snake, just like his daughter. Jumped at the opportunity when my father offered to take down John. His price is the pack, and he could have it. These new plans you speak of? He asks, leaning on the edge of his desk. Everything is set in motion. Did you speak to your brother? Is he keeping the council away? I ask him. Clark nods when Amber waltzes into the room. She pecks her father on the cheek. The girl had her father wrapped around her finger. Clark didn't take too kindly to Marin and Ava, calling her out when Marin challenged her father. Even if what they spoke was true, and it was true, Amber was willing to bet anyone to remain high on the totem pole. Damaged her and her family's minuscule reputation. Yet appearances are everything to these BS. Fools, I would use it if it helped me to keep gaining the advantage. Amber out, we are discussing business, her father says, and she pouts, batting her lashes at him. Can I go see my mate? Clark waves his daughter off. Amber escapes quickly, sending me a wink as she sashays out of the room. So, what has changed? Nothing for you. You will have your pack once John are dead. My father will grant the pact to you upon his return. But as for me, I have found my mate so that I will bargain Ava in return for her and leaving the city, I tell him. So I don't have to do anything? No, just stick to the plans as originally planned, and I am leaving you in charge of making sure my father gets back into the city once the council leaves to challenge Lucian. Your father wants to challenge Lucian? Yes, because if I go through with my original plans, my mate won't submit to me. Unfortunately, she is close to them. I promised I would back down for her, and you intend to? He asks incredulously. She is my mate, I tell him simply. But what of John? The evidence the council has and all records are in his name for the Forsaken facility. So as long as your brother kept up his part of the deal, he will be executed either way by the council when they realize it was Claire's DNA that my father was used to morph the Forsaken. Rest assured, this had been in the planning for nearly a decade now. I know what I am doing. They will have no doubts my father was forced, especially when handed the information about my mother, so we frame John. You leave with your rogue mate, and where does that leave me? Lucian will kill me, Clark growls. Not if my father kills him first, he is the blood alpha, Clark states, as if I didn't know that already. My father only has to get close enough. One bite, and it is all over for him. Lucian will kill his own family once he turns rabid. Then the city is yours and my father's to do what you wish with. And I will be far away from here with my mate and her daughter, I tell him. You're keeping the brat too? Mind your tongue, Beta. I can easily change the plans again and cut you out of them and the slag daughter you have, too. I wonder how your rep will fare if I release the footage of the gangbang she was involved in. Clark growls. And you will hand that footage over when it is all said and done. I nod to him. We had a deal. He just needed to help my father get back into the city. Finishing up our little meeting, I headed home, well, what I was calling home for the time being. Pulling up, I see Embers' little hatchback and groan. I couldn't stand. If she wasn't mated to one of my men now, I would tell her to FK off. Walking inside, the first thing I do is check Ava is okay. She is still tied up and gagged. I untie her so she can use the restroom in the corner of the room when Porter comes in. Got that information you wanted, boss? I hold my hand out for the folder, and he places it in my hand. I sent some men to kill the kid for you. They plan on taking her out during the school run, you what? I bellowed, spinning on him. He flinches, taking a step back. I thought that is what you wanted, he stammers. I growl, stalking toward him. Did I ask you to do that? I ask him. He shakes his head when Amber comes in, and I sneer at her. Call it off, now. I snap at him. He nods his head, quickly ripping his phone from his pocket and nudging Amber out of the room. She stays. I'm sorry, boss, I will sort it. I thought. You thought wrong. Do you dare make decisions on my behalf? Now you will know what it feels like. Amber. I growl, pointing to my feet. He had to learn there were consequences for not obeying me, and he would learn. Amber was all too willing to comply. Porter quickly dials. I will take care of it, he gushes, and Amber looks up at me as I look down at her. The woman disgusted me. She really was a. She is willing to do anything to remain at the top, even with her mate watching behind her. Porter makes the call, and I nod to Amber as Ava moves back to her spot. Sit. I tell her and she does, rolling her eyes before cuffing herself, knowing I would send Porter over to do it if she didn't. I nod to Amber, who fumbles with my belt? Porter whimpers, clutching his stomach, and I focus on the wall. Vile thing, she was like a leech. And if she wasn't the beta's daughter, I would have killed her by now. This was merely a punishment for her mate, who eventually begged for me to stop, and I was glad. Shoving her away, I tuck myself away, and she wipes her mouth when I grip her face. My phone started ringing in my pocket, and I knew it would be Macy. She definitely would have felt that, which only angered me more as I gripped Amber's face. Disgusting. And you're not even good at it. I sneer, shoving her away. FKU, Carter. Amber sneers. Been there, done that. You were even worse, Amber. Now, get out of my face. Both of you. I tell them, pulling the phone from my pocket. Macy shrieked at me the moment I answered. Chapter 127. Macy leaving Marin and Lucian, I escaped to the roof, slipping through the doors and up the stairwell. I couldn't afford to be overheard as I made the call to Carter. I was furious. It was bad enough I had to bargain with him for Ava. I screamed at him the moment he answered. Well, hello to you too, he purrs. You think I can't feel your infidelity, you? Yet you expect me to run off into the sunset with you. I snarled through the phone. I was teaching one of my men a lesson. Don't pretend you haven't got up to mischief today, love. I know you visited your internet boyfriend, he says, and I chew my lip. I scrub a hand down my face, staring at the night sky. Macy, are you there? He asks, almost sounding concerned. Yes, I'm still here. Good. So have you thought about what I said? Have you gotten all your ducks in a row and are ready to leave with me? How do I know you will stick to your end of the deal? I don't trust you, I gave Micah back, didn't I? Don't doubt my love now. But for ensuring purposes, we can leave her at the borders before we head to the cabin. A cabin? I am supposed to leave my daughter, my life behind for a cabin. I chuckle. No, you can bring Taylor, he says. Yeah, definitely not. I would never allow her near this monster. Yet he would be sus if I left her behind. No. Not until I know you stick to your word. I am leaving Taylor here. I want to ensure you're safe first. I would never harm your daughter, Macy. Why do you think I was punishing one of my men? He wanted to have your daughter killed. I stopped it. Vile woman, he says. Where is Ava? I ask, ignoring his words. Beside me, safe and sound. And she will remain that way, as long as you abide by the plans, Carter tells me. And no harm will come to anyone here. I asked him. None, you have my word. I just want you, I chew my lip, leaning on the wall looking over at the city. Fine, we have a deal. Send me the details, I tell him before hanging up on him. I didn't want to talk to him more than I needed to. I sigh heavily, I could do this. Yet I just hoped the band didn't come in the way when it was time to kill him. And he would die for what he had done. However, turning around, I was about to head back inside when I spotted John sitting in one of the fold-up chairs. Interesting conversation, you just had Macy, John says, drawing back on his cigarette. Yes, indeed, it was. So I assume you have a plan and reason for keeping this from my son? And my daughter? John adds as Jalen comes to stand by John. How I was stupid enough to not realize I was being followed and that John was up here the entire time was beyond me. I let my anger get the better of me and became solely focused on Carter's infidelity that I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. So you lied to Marin and me earlier, though I knew it was a lie. You don't get periods after a hysterectomy, Callan says. I admit I panicked when put on the spot. Yet it wasn't actually a lie. I still get cramps. Technically, I still get the occasional cycle, and monthly cramps, though they are more of a dull ache. So you do only have a partial hysterectomy? He asks, and I nod. Yes, I still have ovaries. But the way Doc explained it besides, eventually going into early menopause, is that my body will still have a form of a cycle, though the body absorbs any egg. But you still lied? Do you think I want to? How would Zoe feel knowing the man responsible for letting what happened to her is my mate? Carter needs to die. And they won't risk my life by killing my mate, so I have no choice. Callan and John look at each other. So Carter is your mate? You're certain? John asks. I nod and bite the inside of my cheek. You can't tell them. I know the girls and they won't risk my life. Carter is the only way. And you could really kill your mate? Callan asks. I have no choice. Besides, if I do as Carter says, he will give me Ava back. It's a trade. John leans forward, clasping his hands together. And you're the trade. He says. Let us help you. I get why you don't want to tell the girls, but you don't have to do this alone. Let us help, Callan says. It can only be you, no one else. Carter has people on the inside helping. He knows things he shouldn't know, I tell them. Okay. Say we let you go along with his demands. Ambush and kill him, you and Tatum split. You have a daughter, Macy. So then what, you die? Callan asks. I had thought of it plenty, which is exactly why I had Marin sign those papers. My baby would be safe. I have plans for her in place. Marin and Zoe will take her, I tell them, and John looks at Callan. I will talk to Tatum after we sort this mess. Killing your mate, we have no idea what effect that will have. It's different from Valerie and me, and you are rogue, Callan points out, and I knew exactly what would happen. I would deteriorate faster. One thing breaking a bond, another slaughtering it. No, Tatum was clear. We were over. I don't want to be pity-marked, I growl at the thought. No one wants a sympathy mark. John and Callan seem to think when John sits back in his chair. Okay, what about, and don't take this the wrong way, but Callan, or I could mark you. You, not us, just to keep you alive. I gape at him. Dude, you're old enough to be my father. Ew. Gross. Not like that. Just. Nope. The bond will still have effects, Grandpa. Keep your wrinkly, dusty old to yourself. I will let you help, but neither of you is marking me. I shriek and pull a face. Yet, I have no desire to be Lucian or Marin's stepmother by default. Okay, we will figure out that bridge as we cross it, no. I will figure out that bridge. Neither of you is taking a bite out of me. I would rather die than be attracted to you. I am not that old. What is it with this generation thinking we are old? I have plenty left in the tank, not that I would, you aren't the only one grossed out by the idea, but at least we had one. Callan snaps. Did you have a black and white TV? You are old then. He curses. Stubborn woman, fine. But tell us the plan, and let's work something out, Callan says, reaching over and snatching John's smokes. He puts one in his mouth. Since when do you smoke? John asks him. When I am anxious. So shut and hand me a lighter. Callan snaps, clicking his fingers at John. He then offers me the packet, and I take it, leaning against the wall. So, what is this plan? John asks, lighting his own smoke before passing me the lighter. We kill Carter, and take back the city, but first I need to get close enough to him and get Ava out, I shrug. And the plan? Callan asks. Ah, that's all I got so far, I admit, and Callan curses. Chapter 128. Marin. Something was going on with Macy and Callan. They had been joined at each other's hip for the last 2 days. And it was always the same excuse, too. They were dealing with the hotel renovations. Yet as Callan left this morning, I couldn't help but wonder because of the way Macy hung up abruptly on whomever she was talking to when I came out to make something to eat. Where are the kids? I ask her as she starts packing belongings into her bag, and why was she so dressed up? Callan and John dropped them to school, she answers with a shrug, trying to push me back toward the room. Go lay down, you're on bed rest. I will bring you your breakfast in. And Lucian? I ask her, not hearing him get up this morning. Usually he wakes me. Something about meeting the council elders with Dante before they pick up Zoe, Macy answers as she shuffles me down the hall to my room. Their constant fussing was driving me insane. Zoe is coming home? I ask, feeling relieved. She could have come home yesterday, but they kept her an extra night so she could meet with a counselor this morning. Yep, and I think everyone is moving to the main pack house today. Lucian said something about organizing it, Macy says as I climb back into bed. I stare at her as I pull my blankets back up and notice she is all dressed up, which I thought was odd. She was even wearing makeup. Where are you going? To see Tatum. I ask her. She chews her lip. Yeah, I was going to try to patch things up with him. Hopefully, he is in a better mood today, she says, yet her jitteriness made me nervous. I couldn't explain why I felt that way, but she seemed off. She had for the last 2 days, and with everything going on, it was understandable, but for her to suddenly hang around Callan and my father? 2 men, who for years she despised, and now it was like they were all best buddies, it had me rattled. She walks off, returning with a tray of tea and toast. Sorry, Lucian, she sighs. It was fine, I would wait for her to leave, hunt my own coffee so she didn't get in trouble. She leans down and gives me a kiss on the cheek as I pluck a piece of toast off the tray. You know I love you, right? You and Zoe, Macy says with a shake of her head. I would do anything for you, without question or consequence. You girls are my family, always have been, always will be. And Taylor and I wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for you both, she says. My brows furrow in confusion and I smile sadly, feeling the same way about her. Yet it struck me as odd. Macy wasn't one to declare her love or show her emotions. She gives me a quick kiss before stopping by the door. I love you, she says. I love you too. Are you sure everything is okay? I ask her around my mouth full of jam toast. Yes, I am fine. I will see you later, she says, then walks off. Taking another bite of my toast, I shake my head at her strange behavior. I would be sitting her down when she gets home and finding out what is going on with her. Maybe I will ring Tatum later and tell him to pull his head in, or get Lucian to do it. For the most part, my day was as boring as every other day I spent in this place. Yet by lunchtime I was starving again and decided after dragging myself out of the shower that I would make something to eat. I was craving cucumbers and peanut butter. My mouth watering at the thought of devouring the strange concoction. I slid my robe on, deciding against clothes, knowing I would be uncomfortable and itchy. Besides, no one was home yet, which had me confused. Callan or Dad were usually back by now. Lucian would be fuming if he knew I was home by myself, yet I wasn't going to ring him and snitch on them. I was enjoying the peace and quiet. I didn't feel like being stared at or criticized for my weird food cravings, and that means I can sneak more coffee. Wandering out to the living room, however, the devil himself calls, his ringtone blaring loudly from the bedroom. I waddle back to the room, puffing and panting as I barely make it to my phone before it rings out. Snatching it off the dresser, I put it to my ear. "Hello?" I rasp out. "Hey, just checking in," Lucian says while I try to catch my breath. I sit on the edge of the bed, my lower back was K*G from the fast pace. I made it back to the room and my hips throbbed. "Marin?" Lucian asks. "Yeah, I am fine, just had a shower, and had to race to the phone," I tell him while tugging the towel that was wrapped around my hair off. I chuck it at the basket by the door but miss and internally groan, knowing I wasn't going to be able to pick this thing up easily. I may be a little while longer. "I am just visiting Tatum." "Good, maybe you can find out what is going on with Macy. She was odd this morning. Did she say anything to Tatum?" I hear Lucian ask Tatum about Macy before answering. "He said he hasn't seen her since their argument," Lucian tells me, making my brows furrow. "Why?" Lucian asks. "No reason. I thought she was visiting him today is all." "How was the council meeting?" "Dunno, they cancelled last minute," and I pull the phone away from my ear hearing someone knocking on the door. "Hang on a second, someone is knocking on the door," I tell Lucian. "Let Dad get it, also I need to speak to him, so can you put him on?" "He isn't here, he left this morning, hasn't been back," I tell him, wandering down the hall. "But I spoke to him this morning after the school run. He said he was on his way back to you?" "He must have got distracted," I tell him as the knocking got louder and I drag myself back down the hallway. "Hold on, I am coming." I yell to whoever it is when I feel my feet get W3T as I step into the entrance hallway. I stop wondering if I imagined it. The knocking gets worse when I hear yelling from the other side of the door to open it. Lucian was yelling in my ear, asking what was wrong, yet my eyes were on the huge puddle of water at my feet. "Marin, who is it?" Lucian asks as I stare, stunned. My mouth opens and closes and I went to answer Lucian when I hear the door burst open and smash into the wall. The sound makes me jump and more liquid gushes out of me, covering my feet and the floor. My legs become soaked when I look up to see armed men race down the hall with their guns drawn, straight toward me. "Lucian, get home," I tell him when a man stops in front of me. He holds out a piece of paper, thrusting it toward me before looking down at the puddle I was standing in and glancing at the men behind him. "Who are you and what are you doing in my house?" I demanded and growled at the man. "Lucian," I could hear yelling through the phone. "We are looking for Alpha John, we have a warrant for his arrest," the man explains. "A warrant?" I ask, snatching the paper from his hand when pain ripples through my abdomen. I clutch the hall stand, the paper crumpling in my fist as I clutched my stomach with my other hand. "A warrant for what and who are you?" I growl through gritted teeth. I look up to see the men in uniforms looking at me warily. "My name is Deacon. I am a member of the Werewolf Council and your father is under arrest for his experimentation on the rogues and creating the Forsaken." I tried to pay attention to what he was saying, yet pain like a sharp knife tore through my stomach. I groan and grit my teeth, trying to breathe through the contraction. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the man asks, a little startled, his hand reaching toward me. I snarl at him and slap his hand away. Of course I'm not alright. My waters just broke, and you just broke into my house. I snapped at him, already feeling Lucian getting closer. We have a warrant, ma'am, he states. FK your warrant. I scream at him as another contraction made my stomach tighten and more liquid spilled onto the floor at my feet. The man jumps back and they all glance at each other as if they had never seen a woman in labor before. Ma'am, the council elder asks. I glare at him. Call a ambulance. I snap at him, not in the mood for whatever it is they are doing here or their oblivious faces as they gaped at me. Chapter 129. Macy's pulling into the underground parking lot. I parked next to Callan and John before hopping out of the car. Callan also gets out, and we quickly go over the plans again while John plays with my phone and pairs it with his and Callan's so they can track me. We will be right behind you. John will grab Ava from the meeting spot, and I will follow. Derek and Dion are waiting for the call. Once we have your location, we ambush him. Callan tells me, and I nod. My heart was thumping rapidly as nerves kicked in, and I was stressing over leaving with Carter, even if only temporarily. Here, but just in case this disconnects, take this, John says, handing me something that looks suspiciously like a suppository. He's pulling my leg, right? I hold it up, looking at it. And what am I supposed to do with this? I ask, and they both mumble and look away from me. Oh, hell no. You shoved it. No way was that going up my butt. It's just a precaution, John mutters. I don't see you shoving anything up you. Do I look like a drug mule? I snap. Always the other, Callan starts to say, but I hold up a hand to stop him before he can tell me his suggestion. Nope. Definitely not. I growl, annoyed at how easy they were discussing my nether bits. Geez, woman, just swallow the thing. John says. I growl but swallow the rubbery device. You better hope that comes out. And easily. I am not going to the hospital and explaining this SHT. I tell him, and John sighs. Hey, you wouldn't let us get anyone involved but Derek and Dion, so we need backup plans. That is the backup plan, Callan tells me. I rolled my eyes before snatching the water off him and sculling some. The thing felt like it was lodged in my throat. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I glanced at it knowing it was getting close to the time. We quickly went over the plans once more. Carter said Ava would be dropped to the old mine tunnels where he dropped Micah. Once I was out of the city with him, that was where John was heading first. Callan followed behind me to the borders in one of the delivery trucks that came in this morning. God knows how much he had to pay the driver of the truck over and wait around, but a random car would look suspicious. Okay, where are you meeting Carter again? John asks. The train bridge. Then once we leave the city limits, he said he would make a call to whoever has Ava. I waited for the message to come in. It was the only thing going on that we couldn't plan for because we didn't know when he would ring. Once the message comes in, I drive to the station, and we all split up. Callan went to pick up the truck, John, to get Ava. As I moved toward the train station, I passed Dion and Derek. However, when I got to the train station, my phone rang again, and I saw no sign of Carter. Where are you? I asked Carter. Get on the train waiting, he says, and I look at the train. No. We had a deal, and the deal stands. Yet if you think I am stupid, Macy, and that I wouldn't know you have a plan, then you are mistaken. Get on the train and catch it to the first stop out of the city, he says, hanging up, and I curse. I shake my head, racing to catch the train before it leaves. I had to jump the turnstiles and slipped through the narrow door gap just in time. Once inside, I texted Callan when I noticed a teenage girl sitting in one of the booths. She had her headphones in, and I quickly tapped her shoulder. She looks up at me, startled. I could tell she was a rogue, and after a sniff of the air, she pulled her headphones from her ears. "Can I borrow your phone to send a message?" I ask her. She looks at my phone in my hand. Out of credit, I tell her before she says anything. She hands her phone over, and I quickly message Callan off it, untrusting my own phone. Handing it back to her, I watch the city slip by, passing Dion and Derek parked on the overpass. I wait by the doors as the train passes over the city. However, I saw police cars and black SUVs racing toward the borders before I recognized John's car screeching to a stop as his car was circled. I try to see what is going on, pressing my face to the glass as I curse. But the train was going too quickly, and I sucked in a shaky breath. The train keeps going. The girl whose phone I borrowed waves me over. "I think this is for you," she says, showing me the phone screen. Callan had replied. "Borders blocked, hang tight." "Something is going on," is all it says, and I swallow and quickly thank her. I had no doubt this was Carter's doing. I hiss under my breath. My phone rings and I rip it from my pocket. "I noticed Taylor isn't with you. And you have no suitcase," Carter purrs, and I grit my teeth. He laughs. "Little mate, you won't get one past me, so I don't know why you tried." "Never mind, it's all right. I will forgive your dishonesty. Make sure to get off at the next stop." "I will be waiting," he says before hanging up. Looking at the train map on the wall, I had no idea what train I even got on, but we passed 2 stations without stopping. I sat down until I felt the train begin to slow. Getting off the train, I moved to the parking lot and spotted a black Mercedes waiting. Carter stood leaning against the hood. He looked impeccable in his suit, and the Bond burned to touch him, but I stamped that urge down. "What? No hug?" Carter purrs, stalking toward me. I try to sidestep him but am swept up in his arms before being pinned against the car. "Where is Ava?" I growl. "And where is your phone, love?" "Hand it over," he growls, feeling my pockets. He finds my phone before dropping it and stomping on it. "Ava!" I demanded, knowing everything was not going to plan. I was barely holding myself together. "In the trunk." "Now, I am done playing your little games of cat and mouse, so I will release her the moment I have marked that pretty little neck," he says, pressing closer, and I turn my face to the trunk, and I could hear the faint banging and groaning coming from it. "No. Release her, then we can leave." "Let her out, Carter," I tell him. "I want assurance first. No one will risk your life." "So you want her, you will let me mark you," he says, trailing his nose across my neck. I swallowed, trying to stamp down the urges of the Bond to give in to him. The sparks were relentless the longer he touched me, making a moan escape me. Carter chuckles, though I see that inside that he had this effect. If it worked in distracting him, I would use it to my advantage. "Now there is the reaction I have been looking for," Carter murmurs, and my breath comes in uneven breaths as the sparks and Bond react to my mate. Glancing around, I see the girl from the train waiting at the bus stop. If I could get Carter to release Ava, I know the girl would help her. "Not here. We have too many observers," I tell him, and he glances around before reaching for the door handle. He pulls on it, opening the door. I glance at it as he steps away and nods to get in. You want her back, then get in. Once I have marked you, I will let her go and not a moment before, he says, and I bite my lip and reluctantly get in. You'll let her out? I ask worriedly. What if all of this was some ploy? Carter leans in, clipping in my seat belt. When he pulls back, he smirks. Of course, he purrs, pressing his lips to mine. Instead of fighting the bond, I allowed it, answering his kiss and internally cringing the entire time. Yet this insane man seemed to think the feeling was reciprocated and cupped the back of my neck, deepening it. His lips trail down my neck hungrily, and I offer it to him. Tears burned my eyes at what I was about to allow him to do. I just hoped I was strong enough to fight the bond afterward. Do it, I whisper, and he pulls away to look at me. Ava can catch the train home from here. Do it, so you know I am yours, I tell him. He observes my face for a few seconds before glancing around the parking lot, and I notice it beginning to empty. The girl I could no longer see was by the bus stop, but now I couldn't see her. Carter? I ask, turning my attention back to him. And you'll mark me? He asks, pecking my lips. You'll let her out? I ask, and he nods. Then yes, but I will let her out, he repeats, and I number CK in a breath and quickly nod. Carter kisses me, and I kiss him back, playing along when he pulls me to the edge of the seat so my feet hang out the door while the seat belt feels as if it would strangle me. He crouches in front of me, his hands trailing up my thighs when he turns his head, offering me his neck. You want me to go first? I ask. Well, unless you can fight an alpha mark, love, you first. Because you won't be awake long once I mark you, he says, and my heart beats like a drum in my chest as panic kicks in. Carter grips my face in his hands. I promised, didn't I? He says. He offers me his neck, and I hesitate before leaning closer when I feel my canines tear from my gums as his scent overwhelms me, the bond flaring to life, and I sink my teeth into his neck. The bond surges as my chest tightens, and my heart swells, letting his soul intertwine with mine. Carter grunts, tugging me closer, holding me closer until the bond forges. When my canines retract, I run my tongue over his mark, sealing it. My body felt traitorous, and I tried to remind myself I still had control. Good girl, Carter purrs, pecking my lips before he rips my head to the side and sinks his teeth in my neck. I clench my eyes shut as pain rips through my shoulder before pleasure makes my entire body tingle, and I submit to the bond and let it forge. Yet as the bond formed and blossomed, I felt my body become increasingly heavy, and I sagged back against the seat. Carter turns me after sealing his mark, pushing me back in my chair and untangling the belt caught around my torso. Ava, I murmur, fighting the overwhelming exhaustion. I will release her. Sleep, he says, kissing my head and shutting the door. My head hits the glass as I slump to the side, yet I see Carter go to the trunk and pop it in the side mirror. He rummages around before I see Ava stagger forward before slumping on the ground as her legs emerge from under her. Moments later, Carter climbs in the driver's door while Ava undid the gag from her mouth. Carter starts the car, and relief floods me when I see she is all right. My eyes flutter as I force them to stay open, a fight I would never win. Yet while Carter spoke soft words, I saw the girl rush from the bus station toward her as he pulled onto the highway, and I smiled sleepily. She was safe. Me, not so much. You won't regret this, Macy, I will take good care of you, I hear Carter's voice. No, but you will regret ever meeting me, I thought before the oblivion of the mate bond swept under me. Chapter 130. Lucian. The phone temporarily cuts out as it goes through my Bluetooth, and I could hear Marin giving the counsel a mouthful. Lucian, she gr0ans through gritted teeth as pain courses through the bond as I race to get to her. Nearly there. Hold on, I tell her, racing through the streets. This explained why the counsel cancelled at the last minute, but why was another question. Yet right now, I had a one-track mind, to get to my mate. Touch me again, and I will gut you. I hear Marin growl at someone. Grab my bag. Over there, you twat. Now move. Unless you want to deliver my babies, get out of my way, she snarls, groaning as another contraction hits her. I pressed my foot harder on the accelerator when I heard her panting as she breathed through another, and Dante white-knuckled his seat as we tore around another corner, the car sliding out and narrowly missing some parked cars before pulling it back. It's too early. It's too early, Lucian. I hear Marin cry out. Yet we hoped she would get to this point. Sure, we would have preferred her to go full term, but Doc expected this, and Dante assured me the hospital was getting prepared, and an ambulance was on its way to her. Now, I just needed to get there. Yet as the engine screamed around the next corner. Dante screamed when we found a roadblock. Cops were everywhere up the main drag blocking both sides of the road, and I saw my father get pulled from a truck while John had his hands in the air. Both of them are surrounded by the council and half the police force. The car screeches to a stop, and Dante is thrown forward in his seat as the car comes to an abrupt stop. Then suddenly, all guns were turned and pointed at us. I curse as the car becomes surrounded. I growl. Lucian? Lucian, the ambulance is here. Where are you? Marin cries as pain ripples through the bond, along with her panic. She was scared she would have to do this on her own, afraid for our babies, and overall, just frightened for herself. Just a detour, love. I will meet you at the hospital, I tell her, watching as the car becomes surrounded. You're coming, though? I can't do this again, Lucian. Marin cries. I promise I will be there. Just go with the ambulance, I tell her before tossing my door open. Where we can see the Alpha, comes a voice, and I turn my head to see John's Beta smiling and walking toward me. John was pinned to the ground, being handcuffed. My father still stood with his hands in the air, and I wondered what was going on when I felt Marin's panic through the bond. Breathe, love. I am coming. I'll be there soon. Just gotta take care of something first. I mind-linking her. We had been avoiding the mind link for weeks, worried about the strain it put on Marin, but seeing as it was baby time, I don't think she would become more stressed than she already is. Well, this is a fun turn of events now, isn't it, Alpha? Beta Clark says when I see his brother Deacon pull up before getting out of his car. I knew he was with Marin, so if he was here, the ambulance had already gotten Marin. Lucian, my daughter? Clark said she is in labor, John says, and I nod to him as he struggles on the ground, trying to get to her. John. Give me a moment, I call back to him when I see a scuffle, and my father shifts abruptly, taking off for the borders. I had no idea where he was going, but the moment he started fighting, so did John before everyone rushed to contain him. My father's giant black wolf takes out two of the men but effectively escapes. Yet Dante and I were surrounded. Well, gentlemen, you either shoot or drop your weapons. Because I made a promise, and I don't intend to break it, I tell Deacon as I start undoing my cufflinks. You are under suspicion for your involvement in the Forsaken and Rogue murders, Deacon tells me, and my brows raise. No doubt Carter and Nixon were up to something. Is that so? I ask him while removing my blazer. I toss it on the hood of my car before I start unbuttoning my shirt, and they start backing up. Yes, Alpha Lucian, we have, Deacon stutters, but I ignore him. Of all days to pick to piss me off, today wasn't one of them. Now, I have a maid who, as you know, Deacon, is in labor, I tell him, tugging my tie off. I tossed it on the hood, mindful of everyone watching me as I sized them up and counted how many surrounded us. We can't let you go, Alpha Lucian. Not until, Deacon begins to say when I cut him off. The hard way it is then, I finish for him as I toss my shirt aside. I hear Dante growl behind me, but I ignore him. I know he has my back. Stepping forward, I smile when they back up. They knew the very danger they were in if they tried to stop me from getting my mate. However, what I was not expecting was for Alpha Nixon's wife to step out of the black SUV behind them. My eyes zero in on her. Of course, Nixon had something to do with this, and looking at Beta Clark, we now knew who the other informant was. We have all the evidence we need to prove this was Alpha John's and your doing, Alpha Lucian. It would be best if you came with us, Deacon says while Nixon's Luna saunters over with a smug smile, her wrinkling made-up face. And what evidence is that? I ask, curious about what I would have to prove myself innocent of. For one, the facility being in yours and John's name, Deacon answers. What facility? The one is hidden in the mining mountains. Also, the amount of incriminating evidence of the patient is zero, of course. To use his own wife for his sick misdoings is purely vile, and you helped him all to drive my husband from the city. We have all the evidence needed to prove our case. Both your signature and John's are on it. The patient used to create the poison and the vaccine. I won't let my husband take the fall for this, she growls. And where did this supposed evidence come from? You? Nixon himself. I ask her, knowing it did. The other council members look around at each other while Deacon looks between the other council elders and me. Now, I am going to give you one last chance, Deacon, to correct this mistake. If not, you will find out why they call me the Blood Alpha, I tell him. If they want a fight, they will get one because no one was stopping me from getting to my mate. So, I suggest you choose wisely because your SHTTY Wolfsbane bullets won't stop me. And if I have to run through all of you to get to my mate, so be it, I tell them, feeling the ripple of the shift as it starts to take over. Chapter 131. Deacon shifts uncomfortably on the spot, looking at Clark while the other council members glance at Deacon, making me wonder if Deacon was only doing this as a favor to his brother, whom we were now aware was a traitor. We found evidence at John's pack house, Deacon declares, and I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. Before or after the Forsaken attack? Or during? I ask Deacon, but he is just silent and says nothing. I see Clark step forward, and John growls and snarls from where he was pinned before hearing the sound of screeching tires across the intersection. I see Slasher Pax Alpha climb out of the car. Alpha Dixon and I were on good terms. However, he didn't have the best relationship with my father, seeing as reportedly my father killed his son Preston. Yet Preston didn't have a stellar relationship with his father, who had threatened to remove his title for misdoings and the attention he constantly got from the media. Yet Alpha Dixon was a good alpha, a little old school like my father, but good. Though, it made me wonder why he had come here. Was he helping Nixon too? You found nothing. Your men turned the place upside down, and nothing. I know this was for Ember, Clark, you, John growled, and Clark nodded to the principal officer, pinning him before one of the officers smashed his baton across the back of his head. I pressed my lips in a line, and one of the older council members glared at Clark, who gave the order. Turning my attention back to Deacon, I fought back a growl. I don't remember you fighting on the front lines, Deacon. So while Patient Zero or Luna Claire was dying protecting the city, were you planting evidence? Or was it your brother? I asked him, wondering what the Alpha was doing here as I felt his aura getting closer. And where was Nixon? I asked his Luna, turning my attention to her. Fleeing, that is where the scum was. Does it upset you that he left you behind with his psychotic son? Alpha Dakeson says, coming up behind me. I lost over 100 of my men in that Forsaken attack, and not once did I see one of Nixon's men step out to protect our city. In fact, half of them were Forsaken, so how can you believe this ludicrous bullshit? Now let John up. Alpha Dakeson growls. We have evidence that this was all thought out, and Nixon was framed, one of the older council members says, stepping forward with documents, and Alpha Dakeson growls. Go, I will handle this, Alpha Dakeson nods to me. Give Marin my best, Alpha Dakeson says, making me wonder if that was why he was here. Because of her? Yet when I went to move toward my car, a gun was lifted, and I growled furiously, only to feel Deacon's daring hand grip my shoulder. My reaction was instantaneous as I reached back, gripping his shoulder and letting my claws hook into the thick band of muscle along his shoulder and neck before flipping him over my shoulder and onto the hood of my car. The bang of his body as the air expelled from his lungs on impact was audible as I removed my claws and gripped his forearm, giving it a quick twist and popping his shoulder out when I felt the first dart hit between my shoulder blades. Reaching back, I yank it out, feeling the toxin burn, but it would take more than one to drop me. Big mistake. Dakeson howled with laughter. Oh, you foolish pup, Dakeson laughed at the young officer. I spun so quickly that the officer had only time to gasp as he came up behind me, and I gripped the barrel of his dart gun, slamming it into his face and disarming him. He clutched his face and bleeding nose when I turned the gun on him, letting off 3 shots in his chest. He staggers back, and the rest of the officers lift their weapons, pointing them at us. I would advise you that doing that isn't a wise decision, Alpha Dakeson states as I get ready to shift while Alpha Dakeson just leaned casually against the hood of my car with his arms folded. Deacon groans behind me and scrambles off my hood, only for Alpha Dakeson to shove him away. Unless you want to take on an entire city, I suggest you step down and let this man get to his mate, Alpha Dakeson says, and I look at him. He nods over his shoulder, and I see hundreds of people stepping out between the buildings and cutting across the roads. It appears your council holds no power here, not against my people, I tell the council members when I see Marin's rogues coming to our aid along with the slasher pack. The council looks around nervously at all the angry faces coming toward them. Seems you have found yourself in a predicament. I suggest you leave my city. They will fight for my Luna, I tell the council, knowing they were here for her. And Alpha Dakeson says behind me before baring his neck to me. I press my lips and give him a nod, glad for once that our city would stand and fight together as one and because of the woman who would fight for them. You earned that position when you stood beside me to fight for my people, our people, and my pack will stand with you now, Alpha Dakeson says, and I smirk, turning back to the council who glanced around nervously when they found themselves completely surrounded. Let him go, Deacon gasps, clutching his arm. What are you doing? Clark says, but one growl from his brother shuts him, and Deacon nods to Alpha Dakeson, just as John was led up. I wave for him to come to me, but he shakes his head. I have somewhere else I'm needed. Take care of my daughter until I return, he says, confusing me, but I shake my head. I didn't have time to ask what was going on. I needed to get to my mate, whose panic was bleeding me through the bond. However, the roads were blocked by cars, which took time, so I shifted. My bones realigned and snapped before I tore off in the direction of the hospital. People scattered, getting out of my way, and I trusted Alpha Daxon would handle things. Dante? I mind link. Yep, I got the school run. Get to your mate, he says, and I cut the link, my paws scraping concrete as I cut up alleyways and tore through my territory. The large hospital building coming into sight made me run harder, knowing she was just there. Where are you? I ask her, feeling her worry. They rushed me in for a C-section. Where are you, Lucian? You aren't here, she cried through the mind link as I smashed through the front doors. The people in the foyer shrieked and scrambled away when one of my nurses pointed down the corridor. Second floor, Alpha, she said, and I tore off for the stairs. Buzzers went off in the distance. As I got to the floor, I found the doors opening by security as people flurried everywhere. My heart pounded in my chest as I shifted back, racing down the hall to find the surgical ward, following the directions of my pack as they pointed out which way to go before I came to a set of double doors. Before I could push them open to find her, a nurse gripped my arm, tugging me to a small room beside it which I found in a washroom. I washed my hands and arms while the nurse tugged a hairnet down over my head before handing me a mask. There wasn't much more I could do than that before she thrust a gown at me. I quickly yanked it on and rushed to the room next door to find Marin lying on a table. Her arms are strapped down out in a position, and I scooted behind them to find Marin with her eyes closed, muttering to herself while nurses pulled up a tent-looking thing preventing us from seeing as they cut into her. An anesthesiologist stood by her head to monitor her. They stepped aside for me when a nurse set a chair for me. I nodded to the nurse, and they moved off somewhere as I sat down. Focusing on Marin, I placed my hands on the side of her face. I leaned down, briefly pulled my mask from my face, and kissed her forehead. I don't break my promises, I whisper to her when her eyes fly open and her lips quiver. You made it, she breathes while staring up at me. Yes, I made it. Always for you, I tell her while Doc and the nurses hurried around while also explaining what they were doing, yet I focused on Marin trusting they knew what they were doing. She was my focus. Valerian? Marin asked. Dante will get him for us, I assured her. And my father? Will be here when he can, I tell her while brushing my thumbs down the sides of her face. Marin, you may feel some pressure but shouldn't feel any pain, Doc tells her, and I take a breath. Doc explained that the steroids Marin was put on should have helped the baby's lungs develop, and she was past 33 weeks, so the fact she carried them this long was good. Yet we all held our breath when he declared the first baby was out briefly, having the baby above the curtain so quickly I missed it. Yet Marin stared wide-eyed in panic when they rushed off with the baby. Why isn't she crying? Marin worries when Doc says the second baby is out, immediately starts screaming. Moments later, the first one gave a screech, and I let out a breath, all panic leaving with the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Baby just needed some suctioning to clear the respiratory, a nurse told us when Doc spoke through what he was doing as he searched for baby number 3 before she was out, too. At the same time, the nurse came to place babies 1 and 2 in my arms. We heard baby 3's mighty scream as it filled the room. Yet I was amazed and awestruck at the 2 little bundles in my arms, unable to tear my gaze from the little creatures we created when the nurse brought baby 3 over bundled up in a hospital blanket. Marin coos as she tries to see. I lean down so she can see better when the nurse places baby 3 on her chest for a few moments. All her panic slips away the moment she does, and the bond blooms with love and tenderness. Never in my life had I ever felt so complete. After the nurse checked Marin and they were stitching her up, the nurse awkwardly placed baby 3 in my arms, and I stared down at our 3 perfect little girls, and I couldn't wait for Valerian to meet his little sisters. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.